All right, today we're talking about something huge, a massive health risk that affects millions of students every single day. And the crazy part? It's happening in a place we've basically been ignoring. So let's get into it. Okay, it all starts with this number right here, 180. Just 180. Now you're probably wondering, what on earth does that have to do with a student's life? Yeah, that's 180 hours every single year. I mean, that is a ton of time. But time spent where? Doing what? And that really is the question, isn't it? Where are our kids being exposed to peak pollution for 180 hours a year with absolutely no monitoring? It's this giant invisible gap in everything we're trying to do to keep them safe and healthy. Now, to really get why this gap is such a big deal, we've got to first look at all the amazing work that's already happening to make schools healthier places to learn. And right at the center of that mission, you've got the Center for Green Schools, or CGS. These guys have been a real force since 2010. I mean, look at these numbers. They serve over 700 school districts, which represents more than 9 million students. And their work is laser-focused on the big stuff: indoor air quality, sustainable buildings, and making schools more resilient to climate change. And believe me, they have a serious arsenal to get the job done. Frameworks, toolkits, a huge national network. They're big in policy advocacy. But, and this is a big but, there's one critical piece of the puzzle they've been missing. They don't have real-time environmental data. So they're working off of best practices and guidelines, which is great, but it's not the same as knowing what students are literally breathing moment to moment. And that brings us right back to where we started. This is where we find that 180-hour blind spot. So what is the 180-hour blind spot? It's the school commute. Yep, the time a student spends on a school bus on average every single year. Let that sink in. 180 hours is the same as 22 full school days. That's basically an entire month of the school year spent in a place where their exposure to peak traffic pollution is a total mystery. And it's not just any time. This commute is a uniquely risky period. Why? Well, for one, you've got diesel buses, especially older ones, that can literally create a little pollution bubble around themselves, packed with nasty stuff like nitrogen dioxide and particulate matter. Two, these trips are happening during rush hour, right? So peak traffic means peak pollution. And number three, and this is the most important part, kids are just more vulnerable to this stuff, especially children with asthma. Okay, so the problem is pretty clear, right? A massive, unmeasured risk. So how in the world do you solve a problem you can't even see? Well, you find a way to make the invisible visible. And that is exactly the mission of a company called Sparrow Analytics. Their goal isn't just to measure general air quality in a city. No, they want to build the world's first real-world data layer of what you and I, and in this case students, are actually exposed to as we move around. So how do they do it? With this cool piece of tech called a Sparrow node. The easiest way to think about it is like a little box that turns any vehicle, and for our purposes, a school bus, into a roaming mobile environmental lab. So it's not just a stationary monitor on a pole somewhere. It's measuring pollution everywhere that bus goes, in real time. And what's it measuring? All the stuff that really matters for our health. We're talking about that nasty particulate matter, PM 2.5, the tiny stuff that gets deep into your lungs. It's tracking nitrogen dioxide from vehicle exhaust, even CO2 to see how good the ventilation is inside the bus. And here's the kicker. Every single data point is tied to a high-precision GPS location, giving you a new reading every few feet. Look, collecting data is great. It's interesting, but it's just numbers on a screen unless you do something with it. The real goal here is to use that data to actually protect students. So, how does this all translate into real-world action? This table really spells out the before and after. Look at the old way. For indoor air quality plans, you had checklists and best practices. Now, you've got live data that proves what you're doing is actually working. Or think about bus routes. Used to be based on, tradition, this is the way we've always done it. Now, you can actually compare high exposure routes versus low exposure routes, and maybe the biggest one, funding for things like electric buses. Instead of just writing a grant application, districts can show hard ROI, proving exactly how much a new electric bus reduces a child's pollution exposure. You can see how this data just branches out and drives change everywhere. Of course, you can optimize routes and justify buying EV buses, but think bigger. This data can be linked to a child's electronic health records, so a doctor can see potential environmental triggers for an asthma attack. It can empower parents through apps, giving them hyper-local data about the air their kids are breathing. And for advocates, it's pure gold. It gives them local, undeniable evidence to take to policymakers. So you can see this is way bigger than just one pilot project or a handful of schools. What we're really talking about here is setting a brand new standard for how we think about student health and safety. And there's a really smart, methodical path to get there. In year one, you start with pilot programs. You just collect a full year of baseline data to prove the concept works. Then, in year two, you expand. You roll it out to entire districts and start measuring the results, quantifying the health improvements, the ROI. And by year three, that's where the magic happens. You have a national data set. You can publish peer-reviewed research. You can drive real evidence-based policy change. Because look, 1 year of data is interesting, but 3 years? That's policy-changing science. The implementation model itself is super straightforward and, most importantly, scalable. You start small with a few pilot districts to show everyone how valuable this is. Then you expand district by district. And finally, you get to that national impact, where all this data comes together to create a totally new standard for every single school in the country. And all of this leads to a really powerful shared vision for the future. The idea is that by 2030, this kind of thing isn't some cool new innovation. It's just standard practice. It's a world where every single school district has what you'd call environmental intelligence, a world where we know what our kids are breathing, everywhere. For decades, that school commute has basically been a data black hole. We just had no idea. But now, we actually have the tools to see into it and to solve it. So it leaves you with a question, right? If we can finally see and solve this 180-hour blind spot, what's next? What other invisible risks can we start to uncover? What's the next frontier in building the truly healthy schools that our kids absolutely deserve?